So I have a couple questions there. One is, if someone, I'm just writing this down. So if someone goes to like a school or if someone's part of a community, they're, I don't know, 14 years old and they go to a school that teaches some of this hateful rhetoric. It sounds like they would be expelled under the system, or what would happen to them?
We can't abide with people. Just the other day we had rockets from Iran,
Mm-hmm.
and there were many Arabs in Eastern Jerusalem and in the areas controlled today by the PA that were standing out there cheering and hoping for the destruction of Israel with these rockets. If a person is like that, then he has no place and no right to stay within Israel.
Yeah.
And by the way, when Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait and the Arabs, the Palestinian, so-called Palestinian Arabs that were living there were cheering, they were all summarily booted out. So that's really the rules of the Middle East. You want
to abide by the same rules as Saddam Hussein?
Absolutely. If when it comes to survival of the Middle East, if you have, but that's just a trick question because it's
not a trick question. I'm saying should we?
What does that mean?
Look up to that guy?
I don't look up with him with everything, but like, does Saddam Hussein breathe? Was he an evil man? Yes, he was highly evil, like sickly evil.
So why are we looking to him for moral agency or leadership?
Jake, the point that I was showing was that there are rules of engagement in the Middle East, and it wasn't Saddam, it was the Kuwaitis. Yeah. It was the Kuwaitis who kicked them out. The Kuwaitis were like, you're pro-Saddam in my land. You want to see the destruction of the state that you're in? So they kicked them out. The Kuwaitis were like, no, bro, we're not going to tolerate our country. Same thing with the UAE. Same thing with Saudi Arabia. If Saudi Arabia about a year ago, 2 years ago, chopped 82 heads off, I think it was 82, of ISIS folks who wanted to destroy their country. It's very simple. If you have people inside your country who call for neo-Nazism and want to destroy you, then you should not allow that, and you should do everything to stop that. You should not accept somebody who wants to destroy your tiny Jewish state within your state or on its borders.
That's a tough thing to
it's really common sense-ish.
I hate to be.
I love these questions. Like, are we gonna be like Saddam Hussein? Like, bro, we're talking about.
You said it. You brought his name up. You were like, I want.
Jake, admit your mistake. You misunderstood. I said to you, the Kuwaitis kicked them out. But besides the point, there are rules of the Middle East. The Middle East.
I have a question.
The Middle East is not
a Western country, but Israel identifies as a Western democracy.
Oh, really?
It's a Western country supported by the U.S.
Thank you so much for telling me what Israel identifies as. That's fabulous. But let me tell you something. I don't see it that way at all. We are a Middle East country with a Middle East people. We're an ancient people from this area. A majority of Israelis are Sephardic from Arabic countries. So do me a favor. Don't sell me that old line like, we're the only democracy in the Middle East. Like, we have some Western elements. We have some democratic elements in our country, but this is a Middle East country that needs to survive in the Middle East. Okay. And so that's the way we have to think about things. Also, we're not an American style country since we are not a democracy for all its people, but a national ethnic state. So therefore we're much more like Middle East countries. I don't like the haughty attitude. I don't like the condescending attitude towards my Arab cousins around here. Okay. This is a region. I'm not here to be way better than the Arabs. That's a total like American Jewish like mythology that has been created. That's not my attitude at all. My attitude is survival. I'm here to survive, and I'm here to push back against bad guys. And I absolutely do not I do not throw off the rules of the Middle East. It's part of the ways to survive around here. I accept the rules of the Middle East, and I'm a Middle Easterner.
I also want Israel to survive, and there's a lot of people like Yuval Noah Harari comes to mind, or Thomas Friedman, who say, hey, we really, really, really want Israel to be strong and to survive and to have a really good reputation in the world like they did prior to October 7th. And there are some critics that, well, there's some people who love Israel so much that they criticize the war efforts, thinking that Israel's being overly aggressive and is part of the global, and has caused, in some cases, global condemnation of the war efforts. I know you're probably going to say there's a lot of anti-Semitism, and yes, there is. My point is that as someone like you or I who ultimately wants to see Israel thrive, isn't there a good argument to be made to say, look, war is a complicated thing. There's pros and cons, and what has Israel really accomplished these last 12 months? I mean, they've hurt their security. They've hurt their relationships around the world, right? It sucks.
Yeah.
Maybe they should have. Maybe they shouldn't have been so aggressive. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the majority of Israelis and people like myself don't see it that way at all. What we see is the big mistake that Israel has done is that it allowed very unsavory forces to build up a military machine against us in South Lebanon, in Gaza. We're talking about miles and miles and hundreds of miles of tunnels, rockets, thousands of rockets, guns, RPGs, grenades, drones, every single thing to attack us. And we've allowed that to flourish right beneath our nose. And now it's time to push back on those kind of forces because the Jewish state's first responsibility is to its citizens, to protect its citizens. And that's point number one. So we have to destroy the bad guys that have encroached upon us and want to destroy us by their very statements. They say it
to
all
what
the time.
extent, though? Sorry, I hate to interrupt you. I hope
to an absolute extent.
So let me just
that's number one. Number two, but there's an important thing I completely don't agree with your. I don't know if you're just playing devil's advocate or you believe it, but I don't agree with the idea that the so-called world, and I say so-called because the world is a big place. I don't agree with the idea that the so-called world will not respect Israel when it fights back bad guys. I actually think that people respect us much more.
But
and I have a simple, Jake.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt you. Right?
That's okay, Jake. Let me interrupt you right back.
Go for it.
If I would ask, scientifically speaking, when was Israel liked and respected more? Was it the day after the 6-Day War, or was it the day after the Oslo Accords when we started giving away our land to our enemies? And the answer is scientifically that world opinion was quite much more with us when we were strong, when we were badass.
But it ain't now.
And it's coming back because Israel's showing after we started killing Nasrallah, after we started getting rid of Hamas leadership, people are seeing that the old Israel is back, the one that fights for its rights, the one that pushes back on the jihad. And the jihadists understand that we mean business, and the anti-jihadists, if they're the Saudis, if they're the UAE, if they're the Poles or the Hungarians, the good part of America, etc., they're like, go Israel, go. Okay, you got to be a leader in the destruction of the jihad. And you know who else? Thousands and hundreds of thousands of Arabs in Syria who see us pushing back the Assad regime that murdered them and displaced 13 million of them. Iranians. Do you think the Iranians want to hear that whole stuff that you laid out, like, oh, Israel should be soft? You think the Iranian people who have been dying in the streets because that regime has been murdering them with no recourse for protection for themselves, you think that they want Israel to be strong? We know, because there's tons of expat Iranians living in Los Angeles where you live.
Well,
do you think a
Lebanese person wants to be bombed?
He doesn't want to be bombed. He wants us to bomb Hezbollah. Again, you're saying these things. I had a video on my YouTube channel.
It's not so simple. It's like, there's destruction. So do they want to get rid of Hezbollah? Probably. Do they want to get bombs? And it's not as simple. I guess my question is, isn't there?
They want Israel to get rid of Hezbollah. Of course they do.
Even at the expense of the
there's videos to prove it. There's videos to prove it, including a big Lebanese intellectual, which talked on TV. I had him on one of my YouTubes. And there's a ton of people talking about that. They want to get rid of the bad guys.
Why can't there be nuance? So, like, okay, fine. Let's say in 100 years from now,
there's no nuance with a Hezbollah terrorist who has dug a tunnel to kill Jews.
Let's say in 100 years from now, Israel's in a different position.
By the way, what's not nuanced about a small Jewish state surviving and also cooperating like the Abraham Accords for a better future of the Middle East? That's quite nuanced.
Well, they're not cooperating with the Geneva Convention, which says that you can't have settlements in the West Bank.
The Geneva Convention was written in the 40s to protect from the likes of the Nazis, who literally ethnically cleansed places that were not theirs and then put in their people and started capturing land. This has nothing to do with it. And that argument has been so disproven over and over again. Every jurist in the world knows that the Geneva Convention has nothing to do with us. This is our land. The land is recognized as ours in 1917 and 1920, 1922. The world recognized that it's written. It's known historically that this is our land. Everybody knows that.
The West Bank specifically.
The West Bank. The West Bank is the heart of the Jewish story. That's where all of Jewish history. You can say West Bank. That's a nice word that the jihadists invented. But the fact is this is where we're from. This is where our whole history is. This is the heart of the Jewish state. The Jewish state is in Judea and Samaria, what you would call the West Bank. And so,
according to religious claims, right?
Not religious history. There's history and archaeology. You said religion. I didn't say a word about religion. Okay. I said archaeology and history, which of course religion corroborates. Yes, our religious belief corroborates that. There's no question about it. It calls for that. And by the way, this is a religious region, right? People respect religion. People respect God around here. Nobody respects all, secular talk, endless secular talk. But if you, for your sakes, I can explain to you that for your way of thinking, Judea and Samaria is the heart of the Jewish state, was recognized such by the British and by the League of Nations, and of course, it's our historical homeland. These things are.
Can I ask you about that? I might be just misinformed. So because you're saying it's recognized. My understanding is that there's global consensus from the Fourth Geneva Convention in the UN saying, okay, when Israel attacked in '67, they took the land that they weren't supposed to occupy it, and now the continuous settlement is breaking international law. And what's interesting to me is,
Jake, are you being serious when you're asking this stuff, or are you trying to play devil's advocate?
No. Well, so this is
if you believe that the Fourth Geneva Convention, which was written against the Nazis who were taking up, trying to swallow up Poland and Czechoslovakia in order to create their Lebensraum and their vision of an Aryan Europe. And you think that the Jewish people back in the area that was called by the Persians 2,500 years ago, Yehud Medinta, the Jewish state, if every scratch that we make in this land finds our archaeology and our history, if you think these are related things, you have been sorely misinformed.
So then I'm mistaken.
Serious jurists have made mincemeat out of that bogus argument. It's like the
international community views Israeli settlements in the West Bank as illegal. Is that wrong?
The whole terminology of international community. The world is a diverse and filled with many different peoples. Let's use that term then. The diverse world views the settlements in the, as they called, West Bank to be illegal. Like, what do we do with that? Did you notice the little verbal trick you just said? I said to you that the world has diverse opinions, and you said to me that the diverse.
I want to give a title to the world, like whatever we're trying to refer to.
There is an element of progressive, woke, international left that have created narratives that the Jewish people have no rights in their ancestral homeland, and some folks at the UN believe that, but those are lies, and there are many countries who stand against that. And even if there was 0 countries who stood against that, I'm not beholden to the world's opinion of the Jewish people. If it was for the world's opinion of the Jewish people, we'd be already all, burnt up, gassed and burnt. The fact is that we Jewish people know our truth, and many people who know history or know the Bible or are anti-jihad know that Israel has every right to its land and has to continue to fight to survive there.
But why that area? Like,
what do you think?
Maybe it's missing. Why that area? Like,
because that area is the heart of the Jewish
According
history.
to what? According to, I'm saying, I know it's in the Bible, but where who said that? Like, I don't understand. Like, why can't they take over Egypt? Like, I'm truly missing this. Like, I thought that the West Bank and Gaza were not part of the partition for Israel.
Okay.
Right?
I mean, I don't know how deep you want me to delve into this, but the bottom line is this. The Judea and Samaria, what you call the West Bank, is actually where the Jewish state always existed. If it was the Maccabees, if it was the first temple,
now we're talking about the you said you're not going to go into religious texts.
I know this might sound confusing, but the book of the Maccabees are a historical fact. They were a sovereign Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. It's not a religious question. There was a first temple. There was a second temple. There were sovereigns there. They ruled. The Maccabees came before Herod. They came in the Syrian Greek era, and the wars of the Jews with the Syrian Greeks at that time are well told in history books. Afterwards, we fought with the Romans. Then we rebelled against them again. And it's like to make to make it just because it's in a religious text, to make it therefore it's only like a God thing is silly. The religious
Well, but
text.
that's not how we like decide things like in the world about laws and countries. Like we don't say,
Well,
oh
well,
well Jesus went to like I'm just saying we don't use that in arguments for how countries should be formed. You know, I could say, oh well, the Palestinians were there.
it's
Like
funny.
it's
It's funny
not.
you say that because Islam, which is the thing that surrounds
I
me,
don't support. I don't support Islam's
you may support or not
reason
support
for.
all you want, but you made a statement that the world doesn't do this or that. And I'm telling you
Yeah.
that the world does a lot of
Mm.
religion and how they decide things. Just because in California, this young Jew doesn't make decisions that way doesn't mean the world doesn't do it that way. All right, that's number one. Number two is we have a history in this land. We are right now a third commonwealth. Do you understand that? Forget religion and God. We're the third commonwealth in this land. Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, is where we're from. That's where the cities that all of our history is in. I happen to work in one of those historical cities. It's called Hebron, and Hebron is where the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs is. It's also a place where King David had a seat of sovereignty. Then then in the Second Temple, Herod built this magnificent structure. Jews have lived in that town, lived as sometimes an ethnic majority, other times as an ethnic minority for 3,000 years. Okay, we've lived in this town. It's our town. We're from there. Okay, and other important cities like Jerusalem are today's modern third Commonwealth capital, but it was a capital in the Second Commonwealth and in the First Commonwealth. Our history is actually how people decided our rights here. How else would we have yearned to come back here if it wasn't for our history? How is it that the Balfour Declaration and the San Remo Accords and the mandate for Jewish Palestine in 1922, which was signed by all member states of the League of Nations, how is it that they recognized Jewish sovereignty in this land? Because they were like, historically, the Jews are from this land. This is Jewish land. Okay, there's never been a Palestine. That's a joke. Okay, there's been two Israels previous. Now this is a third one, and we're back based on our historical connection to this land. Not to mention that we purchased it and won it in wars, et cetera, et cetera. So the point is that Judea and Samaria is the heart of our land. And when you come here, you recognize that the Jewish state is in the process of assuming more and more sovereignty to the point that'll be a normative part of Israel. That's what's going to be in the end.